game development studio based in Brooklyn. I'm so excited to be here with you today. We're here to talk about the gigantic and growing world of esports and the ecosystem and all of the opportunities that have arisen in esports for brand partnerships, brand sponsorships, and endorsements. And it's really my pleasure to welcome the panelists for today's discussion. First, I would like to introduce you to Jordan Oliver. Jordan is the head coach of esports. He's program director at Randolph College, based in the United States. And I'm really excited that Jordan's here. Hey, how's it going?
Great. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
It's awesome to see you and to talk about esports and sponsorships. And then I'd also like to bring on to this panel Niklas Hatje. Niklas is the CEO and co-founder of GameBuddy, based in Berlin, Germany. So welcome, Niklas.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Hey, Niklas, wie geht's?
Mir geht's gut.
Nice.
Thanks.
So I guess maybe what we could do is start out this discussion, if you wouldn't, each of you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves a bit more, spend, maybe even, a few minutes, maybe up to 5 minutes each if you want that time to talk about, what you do in the world of esports, what your relationship is around working with brand stakeholders, whether it's in terms of endorsements or sponsorships. And maybe if you feel like it, if you could pick one word to describe the current state of esports and brand sponsorships, maybe choose a word to kind of might describe it. You don't have to. I know I'm just bringing that on you. So should we begin with Niklas?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So as you mentioned, Margaret, I'm Nick from GameBuddy, and I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at GameBuddy. And we at GameBuddy are building the first interactive esports events, leagues, and tournaments where viewers have a direct impact on what's happening in the game. So in our leagues and events, the players not only play for the victory in the game itself, but also play for challenges that viewers can vote for live while watching the game, and thus they can impact what they want to see, and they can also give their favorite teams a little bit of an advantage to help them win the game. And this way we can of course also monetize the interactions from viewers directly and help teams and streamers to monetize their fans as well. I think we will also talk about that right now a lot of the income from esport is in sponsorships, and we're helping teams to also better monetize their fans. We're still quite early in, still startup stage, are yet doing some showcases within the German-speaking region. Our last tournament had about 370,000 viewers, which was on our second tournament actually, so quite good numbers already. And for the third tournament, we were able to sign Razer as one of the main sponsors. Maybe I can also talk a little bit about that later on. And of course, our interactive concept also helps brands to better activate their brands and values across the viewerships. Yeah, I think that's what we do in a nutshell, and I will share more later on, I guess.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Jordan Oliver. I'm currently directing and head coach at Randolph College, relatively new on campus here. My background is in marketing and writing, whether it's for analysis or advising, maybe internally, or I'm also contributing writing and editing for a few different websites and gaming news, esports news enterprises, I guess you could say. But my focus right now really is sort of the intersection of education and esports. So gamified learning, strictly esports as competition. But I really don't like to define esports as competitive gaming. I think it's extremely limiting. I think I think it's more pop culture, and that's an idea that Chris Hanna of Esports Observer put in my ear at one point. That's his phrasing. He sort of stumped me with this question, define esports, and I sort of stuttered through trying to really encapsulate, and he just said pop culture is really where it is. It's this sort of new ecosystem. So in one word, I would say limitless, or unlimited potential there. But yeah, as setting up this esports program, because it's more than just varsity gaming in competitive nature here. Acquisition of sponsors is a big part of my job, and sort of selling and marketing the program, because it's ultimately recruitment and retention. That's what we're after, and adding value across the board. And that's something that in my other life as a marketer or advisor, that's that's my bread and butter would be finding a good match. Endemic and non-endemic is really, it's highly, you hear it a lot. It's in marketing in general, but sort of defining what that is in esports is becoming increasingly difficult, I think. So yeah, I would say unlimited potential for not only learning, but for growth. And I'm extremely curious to see where we go, see how that's defined in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And I just want to mention to my fellow panelists, I don't need to be asking every single question. You guys ought to feel free, ask questions. You don't have to just wait for me to sort of present things to you. So with that in mind, Nick, you did mention that you did this, I thought, really cool partnership with Razer for the Valorant Challenge Cup. And I just think what you guys are doing is super innovative in general. Do you mind talking us through what that partnership was and some of the highlights, and maybe even opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, sure. So first off, I wanna also say that I completely agree that esports is not only competitive gaming. That's also why we think that our whole concept has a lot of focus on entertainment in general, instead of just like pure competitiveness, which is also entertaining on its own, but that's not the only way to entertain people, right? So that's why we come in with our challenges and create lots of fun moments that are just entertaining to watch and not always just competitive. And the Valorant Challenge Cup was actually the tournament I was mentioning, where we had about 370,000 viewers in total. Was quite a success in numbers, and we brought on Razer for the first time to activate their products within our tournament. So it was quite a standard package for now, because it was the first package. So we will continue working with Razer, where we will be a little more creative also in the future. But there, people could win Razer products by voting for challenges. For example, they had the chance to grab stuff by voting, by participating and interacting. And then there's this normal standard stuff that's in esports nowadays already old, like logo rotations, that you just show the logo. We were also taking Razer into our production as well, so that we had Razer products in there. We were also mentioning Razer, and in the future we will also have Razer sponsored challenges that are fitting to their core values, like what the brand really wants to deliver. So we pick challenges that fit to Razer in its core values, so that these challenges will then be presented by Razer, and in the future maybe also give extra chances to win the product or something else. So I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg at the moment, just starting to get creative together with Razer. And I always say, especially in esports, like activations or advertisements that don't feel as if it's advertisement are most of the time the best ones. And that's what we aim for as well, to just bring across, activate the brand within the concept without being annoying or something else, but rather that it gives something to the viewers, and the viewers feel appreciated that they are part of the tournament.
I totally hear you. Adding the level of challenges for the viewers to participate in, and then giving brands the opportunity to be a part of that takes, as you're saying, brands and sponsorships to a whole new level. And I think it's also interesting that both you and Jordan, sort of set out to put forward a definition of esports that not a lot of people might think of from the beginning, but it's true. I mean, esports as an ecosystem, you can't even say it's one thing. It is a cultural and a pop cultural phenomenon. Jordan, so I'm really fascinated by the fact that Randolph College is took that innovative step to create a program around esports. Can you share with us sort of how that came about, and sort of to what extent what you're doing mirrors what a lot of college sports teams who might be, hockey teams or basketball teams, how that might be similar or different?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, there's this shift in higher education in general. A lot of people are moving away from a traditional liberal arts degree, or maybe pursuing something more specific. So definitely a need to innovate as there is with anything, to survive, adapt. The administration had the foresight to start thinking about this a little while ago, and really the writing is on the wall that it's something that students are doing in their own time, right? So estimates, or some people estimate as high as 80% of people are gaming in some capacity. It's probably a little lower, but they're doing it. Students are doing it, especially. So how can we channel that through education? How can we capture that audience? Get them from being behind a computer screen in their room and into a room with fellow students and share ideas. It's really great for retention, and it's also great for recruiting new students to our institution. So, I mean, there is a dollars and cents reason, of course, but there's also just gaming and esports now is going to be, and is, one of the most highly sought after jobs, career paths right now. And what that means, it's almost hard to define. It could be audio visual, it could be programming, devs, marketing, but just to be making money in that space is something that a lot of students, a lot of young people, and a lot of people our age see that this is a great career path. So I always show the League of Legends final from a couple years ago with the AR augmented reality dragon and this huge set production.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I mean, it's an amazing thing. And then how many skilled workers did that take to pull off? Everybody is adding value to that across the board. And that's kind of the beauty of esports, and where we can kind of differ, not wholly from traditional sports, but we really can add value to those other more traditional sports, those more traditional aspects of campus life. With whether it's on Twitch, and we have a random, Wednesday afternoon stream that happens to bring in 160, concurrent viewers. That might not seem like a lot, but a random, Division III swim meet on a Wednesday afternoon is probably not going to have 100 people in the stands. So that's really an amazing venue to sort of put this great outward facing, production on. And in that, we can check out our swim team interstitial at the bottom, or a lower third, or an advertisement in our stream, and sort of prop them up as well. And we can kind of leverage that to their traditional sponsors. Of course, you're not seeing as much interest yet still, with some of the more traditional embedded athletic sponsors, of course, like Coca-Cola, and everybody sees the writing on the wall and they're getting on board. But in seeking funding, we typically would go to a more endemic, somebody that makes peripherals, Logitech, and Razer, Corsair, and most PC companies want you to be using their computer, their equipment. I think with COVID, you've sort of seen that natural uptick in virtual engagement and virtual interest, and people going virtual. But that's actually kind of seen a pullback as far as sponsorships being willing to just sort of toss out money, because either their supply chain's disrupted, or they have a more lucrative path to do business right now. They don't necessarily need to give our program 24 free gaming mice, keyboards, and headsets, like you might have seen 6 months ago, even a year ago. I think I expected more of a correction actually in the esports sort of business world at the onset of COVID, because a lot of people were saying it's overvalued maybe. And I still think there's probably a correction coming, but with that sort of upswing that everyone talks about, it's kind of fallen off at the beginning of COVID. Virtual, watching hours of live streams skyrocketed. Now it's kind of tapered off as some traditional sports are coming back and things like that. But yeah, brands really, there is value. Obviously you have to find a good match. It doesn't make sense for a lot of companies to be partnering with, say, a Randolph College or even any given gaming tournament. But there really is a great use case. There's a great pitch that can be made to pretty much most companies that you can think of, because gaming is so varied. One IP has a completely different demographic than another. So to say you're not a good fit for esports is really sort of naive, because you might just not be a good fit for League of Legends, or you might not be a good fit for Rocket League, but maybe you're a good fit for a competitive Minecraft or XYZ. So bringing it back sort of here at Randolph, I think it's just important to get the stakeholders on board, to be as informative as possible to what's applicable to them, to show the strengths, if you are at a college, go to your athletic director or whoever's in charge of, your more successful traditional sports, and tell them the value that you can add to them, show the crossover potential. And once you have the sort of people at the top on board, I think you'll see, that support once it comes from within. You'll see a lot more maybe non-endemics jump on board, because people say, "Oh wow, you know what? This is a great fit for that engineering firm downtown," or we have a maker space here in Lynchburg that I think there's some really interesting potential that you might not have popped into your head right away with gaming. So long answer, but I just think that again, it's sort of unlimited.
That's great. Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I actually had a question for Jordan, if I can just ask that. I would be interested, how do you see, where do you see the difference, especially in terms of college sports, from esports to the normal regular events? What would be the main difference, you would say, in terms?
So say versus a lacrosse or football match,
for
or something?
example,
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the overhead is a lot less, that's for sure. So the investment is much lower. Maybe initially you put a chunk of money in, but you're certainly not building an arena. And I think, it's interesting that anyone with a hoop and a basketball can sort of play basketball, or know how to play basketball. But the different IPs, like I was saying, the different games that you play, it's so varied. So, and we also don't own the rights to that. So you see this, if an update or a patch comes out in Overwatch, the whole meta of the game or the path of least resistance to victory changes overnight, maybe, and so you sort of see this shift. So it's moving a lot more. You have a lot more a bigger responsibility to explain what's going on, maybe to sell it. So that sort of comes into marketing. Exactly what you're doing. But yeah, I think that we do lean into the traditions here at Randolph. We were founded as a women's college in 1891, and we went co-ed in I think 2008. So we still have a huge tradition of female empowerment, and in Wildcat, the W and the C are both capitalized to stand for women's college. So we have these traditions like this. So we use that as a differentiator versus you can't really differentiate in sports as much, because the sport is a sport, and you might have a male team and a female team, but we're truly co-ed. The demographics are so wide and different, and we're still figuring out what they are. But also, just there's no NCAA, so there's no governance, really central body at least. You have different people in the space, NACE, for one, National Association of Collegiate Esports, who's really very much working towards becoming sort of an NCAA. But that also, without the NCAA, it means that we can our recruiting practices can be much different. We can offer sort of a tailor-made experience, and that's also very attractive to brands because Nike can't give, say, a recruit to a football team a pair of shoes and say, you should use our athletic equipment. But Razer very much can come into Randolph College if they wanted to and say, I want you to use our mice and use that as a recruiting tactic, say that, you come on board here and you'll get the best. So it's really interesting. And another point really quick that I'd like to make is, in esports, the way I see it, at least in equipment and maybe even in the ad space, the difference between a Kia, a Honda, and then a Ferrari is really small margin as far as investment goes, to maybe the value you're getting, but also the equipment that you're using. You can spend $1,500 on a gaming PC and really get the job done for most esports things, but you can also spend $500 more or $1,000 more and have something that is truly top of the line, truly the best of the best. You get that Ferrari instead of just a normal regular car, I guess. And you can sell that. You can sort of show that investment that you care, and it's cool and it's in. But I think esports is just so much more equitable if handled correctly than traditional sports.
Yeah, and you mentioned one thing that's also very important, I think, is that like the amount of brands that are active in esports is just so much lower than in traditional sports that like your brand just naturally shines out more because maybe you're the only brand even that's engaged, or maybe one of 3 instead of one of 30. So that's also, I think, one of the big chances that esports still has. Of course, as it's getting more mature, that will likely go away again. But at the moment, it's definitely one of the advantages for brands.
Absolutely. I definitely think some brands are starting to get that fear of missing out. So maybe some people that don't really need to be in the space are jumping in. But a lot of people should be afraid of missing out because I do think the time is now, maybe even 2 years ago to now. But absolutely no better time to make sure that if you're in the space, you're being smart about it and you belong where you are. But yeah, it's amazing the value there of, like you said, just being able to stand out.
Yeah, 100%.
So with all great stuff, and we'll kind of follow up to what you're both talking about in terms of working with the return on investment and working with different brands and all those opportunities and fear of missing out because more and more brands are becoming aware of esports. When you're speaking with potential brand partners, what are some of the ways that you both look at in terms of measuring success for these kinds of partnerships?
Yeah, measuring is always a thing that you get asked for. But I think like the biggest asset that esports brings is probably the things that are hard to measure. I mean, you can measure stuff like impressions, Twitter tweets about the topic or something like that. That's all fine, but I think the biggest asset that esports brings is like the brand value you get across. I mean, I don't know if you know SAP, like the big German company. Like they just went into esports, for example, because they wanted to have higher chances to recruit people. That was why they engaged with esports, because they were kind of a lame company considered, and that they're now so active in esports. Now they're kind of cool again, and I think that's the big value that esports brings. That you can be one of the cool companies for the young audience in esports, and of course that's very hard to measure. I mean, you can try it in different ways, but like for now, at least we are not measuring that impact right now. We can just show brands like the use cases where it completely worked, and you can really see that it worked, and say, okay, we can also do that with you. How's that for you, John? Do you do anything there?
Yeah, much the same. It's the KPIs or just the metrics in general are very much, I would say, the same as most content marketing campaigns. But as far as what is measurable, I think in the next few years we'll get a lot better data coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I really think in selling, say, a marketing campaign through esports, There's some very much similarities to influencer marketing, and it's highly effective. It's a lot of engagement, very passionate group of people, and largely a group of an audience that has money, to be quite frank, in general. So I think that, it's one of those things, as you said, it's as he said, it's cool. And you could be missing out in the sense that if you're a tech company or anything even close to it, and you are not in the esports space, you're almost losing legitimacy, in my opinion, nowadays, right now, if you're at least not looking at it.
Yeah.
I also think how customizable it is very interesting. It's not hard to have a campaign going, but have it be different depending on the broadcast that you're watching, sort of tweak that advertisement. So I think that's interesting. That's sort of something that's a selling point, is how easily you can sort of tack and maybe retract or go back or just shift in a different direction on the fly in esports if something's not working, without alienating the partnership that you're in. I just think it's super interesting. I think we're seeing esports viewers and fans, and gaming in general, really. Some people, when they poll them, it's somewhere around 50% of viewers or participants say that they don't really mind when brands are advertising a sort of in-game in some regard. Of course, it can be distracting, but I think that that's a temporary thing, because they see when these brands get involved that it's adding legitimacy to gaming. It's adding legitimacy to something they love. Honda is going to have a banner in League of Legends. I saw yesterday, sort of like a traditional baseball field advertisement on the map. And I don't think that the fans are going to mind that, because it's like, oh, wow, Honda's in our game. Like, this makes the game that much more legitimate. And it means that money's coming in. So then we can have a better game next time because this money is coming in. So it's adding value on both ends, to both sides.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. And actually, I saw data that, especially in gaming, like the people are way more positive, or in esports are way more positive to brand involvement in general than it is in traditional formats. So I think about like more than 50% think really positive about the brand being involved. Like 38% don't mind, and then there's a small percentage, like there's always some people that don't like it, right? But the general like group of people really likes that brands come in, and they also feel kind of honored sometimes if it's made well. Like, you can also mess it up, as always, but if it's a good campaign and you thought about it, what you bring across to the community, then people are very much appreciating you being involved.
I agree.
And you're saying, Nick, that you feel that part of the reason, at least, they appreciate it is because of the meaningful integration, right? And is there a certain, do you feel like you both feel like there's a long tail of value that's associated with brand endorsements in esports, that even if it's a one-off event, there's a potential to create lasting value? Because as we all know, as people who work in business and cut business deals, sometimes you don't sign a deal like after the first try. It's something that might be an ongoing relationship, and it's a touch point where people can establish relationships with brands in a meaningful context, right? What would you say what would you advise in terms of what not to do around setting up brand partnerships or endorsements? Like, can you give us examples, advice to people, don't ever do this?
I mean, the best overall advice would be to at least think about what you do before you go in. I think that's in general the best advice, because of course there's the fear of missing out, but don't just rush in because you're afraid to miss out without thinking why you want to do that and what do you want to achieve with that. I think that's the main advice. And then if you think of a good concept, think what you give to the community, I think you're pretty much safe that it's a good community, a good commercial. But in general, like sometimes like brands and especially corporates think only in their corporate boxes, right? They don't think about the community. They don't ask someone that's maybe part of the community or knows the community. And I think definitely get some advice from someone who knows what esports is before just rushing in. I think we had some German companies that made awful campaigns here. I think one of them being Aldi, who was marketing against gaming in a gaming event, which is generally not very clever. And they had a huge shitstorm about it because they were basically saying that gaming is not bad, not good, and that parents should control their their kids. And of course, if you just don't think about it, like that's the worst thing you can do. But I think as long as you think about what you want to do, what you can give to the community, I think you're pretty much safe to go.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say to add on to that, I agree with everything that you said, and just make sure that you know why you're in that space, and be authentic. It's very, and that's sort of a played out. Everybody should be authentic, but gaming has a very large cancel culture, and you don't want to go on Reddit and try to maybe save your situation, or just go out into an open forum and talk to gamers or esports enthusiasts, because they're very passionate about these titles and IPs that they love. And if you're new to that space and you're sort of alienating their core beliefs and values, they're not going to like it, and you will get rejected, and the backlash will probably end up spending more money on a PR campaign just to get back to where you were than you did initially getting into this space. So really, in esports, as far as from a coaching perspective, I talk to, and in gamified learning in general, we talk about win conditions a lot. So every day that you go in and play, you should have your own win condition, and it shouldn't necessarily be winning. It should be just improvement, or maybe you don't violate this one fundamental of the game. So as long as you're meeting your win condition, then that's a successful endeavor. That's a successful time spent or investment. And I kind of say that to any brand that's looking into esports or gaming, is make sure that you have a win condition going in, and it's probably not necessarily going to be a traditional deliverable as far as number of click through or time spent on a page, but identify your win condition, and then know for sure that you're headed towards that when you get into gaming, for sure.
That's a great point. Do you both feel like you spend a lot of your time educating the brand stakeholders about what esports is? Because there are quite a few misconceptions, right, in terms of what kinds of games or genres constitute esports, or and I've noticed that the space itself is quite frothy, as they say. So everybody's doing esports on a certain level, which is not a terrible thing, because eventually some of those will fall off, and then you'll have more of a vision. But like, are you spending a lot of time educating the marketplace about the opportunity, or are people coming to you that you're surprised to hear from?
Actually, like, we're spending a lot of time educating. I think it's also Germany. I think Germany is also a little slower than the US. So I guess it's even worse for us, especially also that we have this huge debate here in Germany about shooter games, because they're like making people kill other people, which is completely ridiculous, of course. But it's very much in the head of people of the older generation, and they don't understand that esports is not only FIFA, or especially not FIFA, but other titles. And that's very hard to educate them into. Also showing what we just mentioned in the beginning, that it's really pop culture, and that it belongs to the people, that it's very, very much like tangled within their lives. It's kind of a completely new world that they even haven't heard about that. Sometimes they know from their own kids because they watch it or play a lot. Mm-hmm. But definitely we're still educating a lot.
Yeah, I would say that most of my time with pretty much anybody that's new that I'm talking to is spent educating. I would say more so than anything else. And it's interesting because in higher education, colleges and universities, you have a lot of people who really rely on tradition and, might be more established, especially, with someone with like tenure or something. They've been in this institution for a long time. They're a big stakeholder. They have a lot invested and they don't want to see it tarnished or that you violate those traditions. So yeah, I have probably an elevator speech that would be for the tallest building in the world because it can go on for so long. But as you mentioned, like first person shooter games, that's a big issue. Like we don't really compete in those at our school because it's so sensitive right now. I mean, we do, but nothing photorealistic for the most part. So no, like Call of Duty, Rainbow Six or CS:GO, but like Overwatch is okay, even Apex Legends, and maybe even Valorant. So it's interesting. You're sort of towing a line, not necessarily for the esports enthusiasts, but actually for the other people that are looking in. And luckily in higher education, when people ask the same question, are these games making people violent? I can kind of point to peer-reviewed studies. I think there's hundreds of peer-reviewed studies on this now. Not enough, not nearly enough studies. But there's like 1 out of 100 that would say otherwise, that there's any link to an increase in violence to what video game you play or even what music you listen to. So at least I can sort of lean into, peer-reviewed study is widely accepted. The research completely is not indicative that there's any link to violence. But yeah, I would say education is so important as far as even convincing parents. They want their student to, they would prefer them to play a traditional sport most of the time because they don't necessarily see the value. That something that they've actually been working actively against is getting their student away from a screen time or out of the video game. It's interesting doing recruiting and going to say like an Overwatch League match homestand and handing out a business card. They usually have like some computers set up for people to just play the game while they're at the match. It's just an interactive, fun thing. And to stand there as a coach or director and hand out a business card to the person's dad or mom and say, hey, if they're interested in going to college for this, send me an email, give me a call. They're doing great communication and stuff. And their face, sometimes they just like, what? And you'll see this kid a lot of times. It's like, I told you, Dad, I told you this is real. And it's just really interesting to see the change that's going on. So I think that we'll have to do less educating in the future, at least on a broad sense. But yeah, right now it's probably the main part of my job.
Yeah, and I also definitely see that brands are more understanding, like this trend of more understanding, and we can also see more non-endemic brands going into the space as we speak, right? It's changing a lot at the moment, and many non-endemic brands are also joining esports. So I think all this education is worth it because apparently brands are starting to understand it. And coming to the shooter topic once again, at least here, it's not really like they don't really care that much about if it's making you violent. I think they're more afraid of the negative backlash that this could have. Most of the time for people in the age that are not doing anything with esports, but if just company X sees that company A is active in Counter-Strike, for example, and they know Counter-Strike is a shooter game, and they think, oh my God, they're doing something with shooters. I think that's where they are afraid of. I think most of the companies understood that it's not really making violent, but they are definitely afraid of the negative impact of that violence.
Yeah, the optics are really important for sure. I would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Optics.
Interesting. I mean, some might say that playing U.S. football is potentially more dangerous than playing a lot of video games.
Or talk about boxing. I mean, or MMA. I don't know. There's so many things that are really violent where you really hurt yourself.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I pitch all the time. Do you rather, full contact sport? What are you actually worried about as far as compromising your student or your child? Obviously you need to have a safe space and prove that it's adding utility and value to their life for sure. But, I think that as we get more into this, you're definitely going to see people stray away and say, you know what, I would rather see my son play Madden than full contact American football and get if they can get a scholarship for it, why not?
Yeah. I came for the scholarship, and I stayed to avoid the head injuries. It looks like Sayera Ahmad has a question about how do you see the recent deals by L'Oreal into Australian esports teams? So that's one huge development recently.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I would love to have been in the room to decide, what their win condition is with that, or what demographic they're going after. I mean, I can guess, I can assume. I think it's ultimately good the more diverse companies that are getting into esports, especially representing currently underrepresented demographics. So women in gaming, more just diverse backgrounds in general. And that's something that, we're trying to do at Randolph ourselves. We want it to be a space that's representative of the actual interest in it. So some numbers are 45% of people interested in esports are females. So if a brand that has an identity that traditionally leans into, a female demographic, I think that there is absolutely a space for it in esports. I don't think it's necessarily a bad fit at all, which it might seem to a lot of maybe traditionalists in gaming. But I think it's really interesting. You have like Bumble, dating app, and they have an all-female team that's actually very successful in Fortnite, and they're expanding, and really just the inclusion of that is doing a lot for their brand. I'm sure L'Oreal's not necessarily hurting for business, but yeah, I think it's important. I think the Australian scene is really interesting. I think it's growing fast. I think there's really a lot of informed and smart people that are sort of leading the way there. And same in France. I think that it's going to be a more nuanced experience than here in North America. Just like in Asia, you have a lot of streetwear and fashion brands that are involved because it's just a good fit there. It's not necessarily a good fit in the North American market yet. Like Louis Vuitton, that's a huge League of Legends campaign, and people were really, I want to say shocked, but on this side of the world, people were sort of like, wow, this has a lot of legitimacy to League of Legends. I don't think they would have gotten the value out of it here. I don't think that an American fashion company or makeup manufacturer might. A lifestyle brand like that is going to have a harder time just with a general endorsement like that. But there's plenty of space for patches on the jersey for endorsements from a lot of different companies. I think it's really good, actually. I wonder what their return on investment is, what they're hoping to get from that.
Yeah. And especially like the Louis Vuitton stuff was sold out in seconds in Asia. Like and those clothes were not cheap. Like they were really expensive, and it was a full success. I have one question to the Australian esports team topic. Is the Australian esports team a female team, or is that a normal esports team? Because I don't follow the Australian scene that much. Because I think L'Oreal is also changing their strategy a little bit to also advance men in the future as well. So that might also relate to that, that they just want to like have this brand awareness that I was talking about earlier. And at the moment, of course, esports is still heavily male dominated. So I think they could also want to like strengthen their brand awareness within the male audience.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I totally think that's probably a large part of it as well. And again, it just harkens back to what both of you said at the beginning of this discussion, that really esports is a cultural phenomenon, and it has nuances based on geography and based on teams and players and audiences and platforms, right? I noticed, for example, GameBuddy, you have a Twitch extension. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is so innovative and cool that you're doing that in addition to your mobile app. I don't know if you want to speak to that any further.
Maybe I can lose a few words about the Twitch extension. So currently we're focusing heavily on Twitch because Twitch is, of course, the biggest broadcasting platform right now. I think they're owning about 70% of the market, at least of the Western market, which is where we focus to now. And we wanted just to create a seamless environment for the viewer. We don't want it to be hard to cast a vote or to have an impact on the game. So we thought the Twitch extension is probably the best way to get that across. So you just watch Twitch on your normal PC like you did before, and then you see a little window inside the stream that shows you the challenges to vote on it, and you can just click it. You don't need to download anything else. You don't need to register even. You just watch like before and can have an impact already.
I really, really appreciate that feature. I think I saw that this morning and I thought that was so cool. And I want to apologize. We had a viewer ask a question. Ahmad asked the question, how do you see big names like Esports, David Beckham, Will Smiths of the world entering into the esports business? What impact will that have potentially?
Yeah, I think in general, it's just very good that big names go into the esports scene or into the gaming scene in general, because gaming is always fighting for being acknowledged, especially by the older people. Like we just mentioned that sometimes parents and so forth don't really think it's a big thing. And if, I don't know, they're a fan of David Beckham because they're watching traditional football, or Will Smith is one of their favorite actors, I think that just gives esports like a bigger impact for those audiences. I think that the whole topic, especially around David Beckham, was a little bit overhyped, to be honest, with his esports team there. But in general, I just think they also see the potential. We believe that esports is going to be the biggest sports in the world in the future. They also see the potential in our smart people, smart business people as well. So it's quite natural that they also start doing something within esports, I think. And it's good for the scene, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that it's good for the scene. It's nice to have a name that you can point to and say,
Yeah.
you know, this from an optics standpoint, look, David Beckham's getting into it. So, you know, FIFA will be up and coming even more so than it is, at least in North America. I know it's going to be a lot bigger. VaynerMedia, I think Minnesota Call of Duty team, I believe that they're a stakeholder in. That's interesting as well. I think I would say it's more of a business decision than a passion project, largely, but that's fine. That's great. You know, I think it adds legitimacy to maybe people that aren't as well informed in the space, and it says, you know, maybe I should be looking at this a little bit more.
Yeah. But especially Gary Vaynerchuk has been very passionate about esports in general. I think for the past year already, he was always pitching esports a lot of the times. Was also mentioning that it's just a pure business decision because he believes that it's growing. But he was very, very passionate about it on many panels where they talked about the topic as well.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. You have like Mark Cuban saying this is a losing money venture, but I think that's very. I mean, he's obviously way more successful and knowledgeable than I am in general, I would say, but it's very limiting in the sense that, yeah, maybe it's not the best investment to go into a strictly esports team right now or something like that. But you definitely can find your place. And I would say if you have the right people in the room, the right investment's going to go a long way. Buying a franchise for $20 million, it seemed very high. League of Legends or Overwatch when it first came out, but can you imagine getting an NBA franchise for $20 million now? And in 10 years, if everything stays on track, it could be valued at, you know, $300 million.
Yeah, exactly. So and he's not even wrong, right? At the moment, you're losing money most of the time when you have an esports team, but it's just a bet on the future, and especially this 10x opportunity that you have, especially in fan monetization as well. Because right now the fan is not as monetized as it is in, let's say, soccer or football or anything else. And if you have that, then you have this 10x opportunity, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's consistent with the game industry in general. You know, it's easy. You know, there are some people who try to enter the space, and sometimes I say to my colleagues, they might as well take their money, throw it in a pile, throw some gasoline on it, and throw a match on it. Because if you really don't, to your point earlier, with anything that you're doing in tech or in the game industry or esports in general, you really have to have sort of an understanding of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what impact you want to have one way or another. I saw a recent report that said that brand sponsorships comprise 42% of revenues for the esports industry. So I don't know if you agree with that general number, but if you do you know, to the point of monetizing the fan more, do you see that sponsorship slice of the pie growing? Do you see other monetization components kind of balancing out that distribution of where revenue comes from? How do you see the esports brand sponsorships figuring in terms of total overall revenues in the next, like, say, 12 months or so?
Yeah, I think in the next 12 months, it's most likely going to stay the same as it is. I think 12 months is probably too short that something major changes, because of course brand involvement is the main monetization source at the moment. And then I think there's like media rights and another B2B category that I forgot now. But for now, it's mostly B2B. Especially with sponsorships, and I think that this will stay the same in the short future, at least, because we can see more bigger brands getting into the space as well, that also bring more money with them, right? So this is not going to shrink, but I can definitely see that especially the digital element of esports is going to grow in the future. Maybe not within the 12 months, but I think right now it's at 3% or something, which is just strange because we're just ignoring the fact that esports is completely digital. So right now we're just doing a lot of things that sport does, or that regular sport does, but we're not using the advantage that makes esport unique enough, I think. And I think in the future that's getting used more, so that also more revenue will be generated over these digital channels.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, as you said, as bigger companies and organizations get involved, it's going to sort of price out some of the smaller players who are no longer going to be able to afford to get into a meaningful campaign. At least they might have to do something more grassroots. But I also think the biggest thing that you touched on, and maybe not in the next 12 months, is media rights. I think a lot of IPs, Overwatch, League of Legends, Riot, Fortnite, however you want to break it down, are realizing that they're sort of giving away a lot for free. Why is Amazon run Twitch getting so much money from EA's IP from people watching their game, and they're really not getting much? So I think we're going to see companies like that having to bid. I think you might even see there's like Trovo, I think, coming out as a live streaming platform. I think that their IPs, their games, might someday be only allowed to stream on that channel. I think Call of Duty might have to get an affiliate deal with Twitch and not allow Call of Duty to be streamed on Facebook or YouTube. I think that might be coming, so that might sort of shift some of the money that's coming in. But I think marketing and advertising sponsorships it'll stay steady. It might grow before it retracts a little bit. But I would say media rights is the other big thing to look for, and I think that could really shift the live streaming landscape that is sort of just you have your big three, I guess, now, and they're getting a lot of value, quote unquote, for free from game developers. So I think the developers are seeing the writing on the wall with that.
Yeah, we've seen those kinds of contractions before in other areas of the games industry, and when that happens, it's a potential reckoning. So there's oh my gosh, we could spend a whole panel talking about that.
Yeah, we could.
I only have time for one or two more probably one more question. Assad from Epiphany wanted to know, where are you seeing investment opportunities into esports and startups teams? Like, is it still a frothy space, or do you see it slowing down or going into different areas more than others?
I, as an esports startup myself, I'm definitely seeing that there's big opportunities investing into esports startups and also still esports teams. What Jordan was mentioning earlier, that there might be a correction in the market. I definitely see that as well, because many esports teams especially are like valued at a very high multiple. So that might be corrected a little bit down, but I still think that this, like, you're not investing, or most of the time you're not investing to get a 2x return, right? You're investing to get a 10 or even more x return. And I think as esports is still very chaotic, which brings a lot of opportunities, I think that this is the perfect time to invest.
Yeah, I would agree. Just if I could jump on to that, I would just quickly and anecdotally say there's a reason a lot of very talented people are leaving companies like Blizzard and any and enter any AAA game maker esports dev into that. Some of their top talent are leaving to go to these startups for a reason. Of course, they're not all going to make it as in anything, but that's not going to be the case for the whole industry if there's not value in it. You go on Hitmarker and see who's hiring right now, and there's a lot of very impressive ideas in the pipeline, I think, that are going to be coming out, and it's exciting for a fan even.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more transparency on some level in esports in terms of like viewership and total hours viewed. Like that it's really impressive to see because a lot of those traditional companies keep a lot of that information to themselves. But when you see that an esports event had 8 million users over the course of an event, and that information is out there, and you can really look at the stats across various channels, it's cool. And the other question I wanted to ask you guys, and I don't know, we have maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and it's probably not a good ending question, is, we could also talk about, spend a whole panel talking about the sales pipelines, the pipelines that are needed in place internally, whether in terms of your platform, your product, your sales, because I used to do brand sponsorships in games, and it's an enormous undertaking to keep that machine going. So I really want to give you both a lot of credit. And if you wanted to wrap up with anything else that you wanted to say, either on that front or sort of what you're looking forward to in the next little while, we could probably wrap up with that.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having us, or me especially, as I just speak for myself. Was fun to talk with you. Really cool topic. As you said, I think 1 hour is really short to talk about esports, but I think there's many other questions that could be answered as well, or could be discussed as well. I personally like my biggest news in esports in this time was the layoff or the shutdown of Mixer. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested how that's going to change the landscape of streaming. We just saw Shroud with massive numbers. Also, Ninja had massive numbers on Twitch. So I'm really interested on how that's going to evolve in the future.
That's good.
Yeah, definitely. Also, thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. I would say the same. I would say that it's for people that are looking into getting into advertising in esports or sponsorships. It's one of the few things that who your audience is at any given time. For the most part, it'd be very hard to say the demographic of any given sports game, who's in the stands, and break it down to a specific percentage. But it can be done, especially if you're trying to add value or invest. You can get those numbers. Maybe not to the public, but you can get those numbers. And then to young people who see this as such an attractive career path, there is a pipeline to higher education now, and there is also a pathway to a career in any given thing. You might not be a player, but if you are and you're spending 5 hours a day or something playing, I would say spend 4 hours a day playing and spend an hour adding something, content creation, or putting your views out there. You might not get noticed, but you have to sort of raise your hand up before you will. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the new talent and the new ideas that come into this space. I'm really excited for AR. I'm really excited to see now that Mixer's folded, what they know that we don't. I'm interested in. So yeah, I think it's amazing. And again, thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, Jordan Oliver and Niklas Hatje. It was really wonderful to meet you both and have this discussion. Thanks to all of our viewers and to Epiphany Talks for welcoming us to discuss this really cool topic. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.